Wallace and Gromit. Who doesn't love them? Maybe fans of Pingu, but let's not worry about that. They are probably the number one animated duo you think of when it comes to British animation, and with their unique look thanks to the help of stop motion, makes them memorable to anyone who has dived into their unique world, that being the north of England. Hey! So with the release of their new movie, Vengeance Most Fowl, on Christmas Day, and because I'm a massive fan of Aardman, I thought it would be the perfect time to rank their 4 shorts and 2 feature films, since there probably won't be another Wallace and Gromit project for at least a decade. I'm not going to waste a second longer of your time, so let's just, go!
Well, I got a bright full moon for y'all right here.
Released in 1989, A Grand Day Out tells the story of Wallace and Gromit taking a holiday to the moon, because in their world, the moon is made of cheese, and with Wallace loving cheese, ain't nothing gonna stop him getting there. If there's one little criticism I'd give this short, it's that the stop motion is pretty inconsistent in some areas. I mean, just look at this design of Wallace, and then this design later on in the show. But at the same time, I can't complain to Nick Park, considering this took him 6 years to finish. That takes extreme patience right there. But that's really as far as my negatives go, because this is just a simply fun time, with some brilliant wordless storytelling and great use of music. Even if Wallace and Gromit was confined to just this short film, I'd argue that they'd still be memorable. Like, come on, an inventor who loves cheese and crackers with an unusual accent, and a dog who occasionally acts like a human but never speaks. That's a recipe for greatness right there. Every other little unusual thing in this movie is also wacky, but not too unrealistic that you get confused by the world they live in, such as the robot who wishes to go on a skiing holiday, and the fact that Wallace is able to build a complete spaceship in the basement of his house. I also adore the montage in this. It pretty much sets the tone of what these two are going to be in future projects, by having Wallace need Gromit's help, because you can't have one without the other. Gromit doing the majority of the jobs, whilst Wallace does basic sawing and painting, just goes to show you who is really the most hardworking between the two, even if Wallace came up with the idea of a rocket in the first place. I also love how the colour correction is dark throughout, despite being a comedy. There's always shadows present in the frame, which really builds mystery when you meet the robot on the moon. And as I just mentioned, yes, this is a comedy, and it definitely deserves that title. There's always a build-up and a payoff, which works wonders in this, such as the robot about to knock Wallace on the head just before running out of charge.
Hello, horse. I shall call you Burger.
And Wallace kicking a ball up and it never coming back.
Have it.
As you can tell from what I've said, this is far from bad. In fact, it's actually pretty good, which just goes to show you the quality of anything to do with Wallace and Gromit. They haven't had anything bad yet, which proves that Aardman and Nick Park handled them with such care and admiration.
You can't rush art.
He's back!
Going into this, I was extremely nervous that this film wasn't going to live up to the previous projects, because Aardman's animated features as of recent, Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget, Shaun the Sheep Farm Again, and Early Man, were quite stale and disappointing in my opinion. But thankfully, this delivered. If I were to simplify this as quick as possible, then I would say this is a celebration of Wallace and Gromit, because look no further than how both characters interact with each other in this compared to the others. Like where Wallace says right at the end,
My best pal.
and the build up to Gromit being patted on the head. It just feels like a satisfying conclusion for the two, despite Feathers McGraw escaping in the end, which personally I loved. It feels like they never truly won, as even though they retrieved the diamond, Feathers is still out there, and does allow the diamond plotline to continue efficiently if they do wish to go on with that. However, I do have a problem with some of the characters, mainly Wallace and the police lady. Firstly, I think Wallace's new voice actor, Ben Whitehead, does a really good job in imitating the late Peter Sallis. When I first heard his voice, I thought he was just going to do an impression, but within the first minute of speaking, his voice acting just fits as naturally as it possibly could. The only problem I have with Wallace is that his dialogue isn't really good, like at all. All he seems to do is repeat stuff to the audience that is obvious and should be told visually. It seriously feels like a major downgrade, especially with the lack of his usual catchphrases such as cheese and crackers. On the other hand, the police lady, I don't even know what her name is, along with the fact that all she has going for her is that she believes that Wallace is innocent when all the gnomes go rogue. And the scenes with her and Peter Kay's character aren't that interesting. At first I was thinking, maybe outside of Wallace and Gromit, no two characters can have a genuine interaction. But then you look at the scene in The Curse of Were-Rabbit with the Vicar and Victor, and that scene is so funny and pushes the plot along very fluently. So why didn't they do it here? But at least they never missed a beat with Gromit and Feathers McGraw. Both of them are still so expressive without saying a word. And Feathers profusely sweating whilst hacking into the gnomes was a funny callback to The Wrong Trousers. This definitely isn't Aardman at their best, but it's without a doubt a step in the right direction. I thoroughly enjoyed the gnomes and how they help others, only to be hacked and to cause havoc. And the boat chase at the end is still very creative, even though it feels similar to another chase from a previous Wallace and Gromit project. And it'll probably get an Oscar nomination for Best Animated Feature, but it ain't winning. The wild robot is winning. You heard it here from me.
I had no bread!
So this is where these features get great. From the beginning of A Matter in Loaf and Death, there's two things that are immediately noticeable. The first being the colours, and how it's probably the best looking out of all the features on this list. It doesn't look too saturated, but also feels as though it blends brilliantly with Wallace and Gromit's comedic and serious tone. The second being the sets, and how this feels like we get the most of the creative looking designs from their world. For example, just look at the house, and how they've got a windmill and a bakery. How original is that? But where I think this film peaks is without a doubt the action. Even the first scene where Paella is introduced and she has no control of her bike, whilst Wallace jumps on the bike and Gromit throws tea cakes to slow the bike's speed. The suspense and comedy I got out of such a minuscule solution to slowing a bike once again shows how many unique ideas the creators have. And Paella, even though she may rank as the worst villain out of all the others on this list, I can't deny she is still very menacing, and a great threat to our duo. Along with her being the only love interest to Wallace who has outright tried to kill him, is something we've only somewhat seen in A Close Shave, where Wendellin's dog Paxton tries to kill her. But at least Gromit's got a love interest, and just seeing them two flirt with each other reminds me so much of Wall-E. I mean, these two did come out the same year, as well as Elton John. The times in which Paella tries to kill Wallace whilst Gromit is trying to save his life are always a blast. It just shows how loyal Gromit is, despite Wallace sometimes misunderstanding the situation. And that final battle where they're trying to get rid of the bomb is probably the most intense action scene throughout these films. The one thought in your mind is that the bomb has got to blow up at some point. And it's always nerve-wracking when the bomb ends up in a different place and always reappears. If there were some parts I didn't like, it's that the pacing around the middle was very off. And by that I mean the sequence when Gromit goes off to Paella's house to return her purse. My one problem with this is the fact that a part of it is a dream sequence, and you think Gromit's actually there, only for him to wake up and he's still there. Narratively, it put me a bit off guard and took me out of the film for a bit, and it was only when he returned to the house when I got sucked back into the story. And the fact that there was nothing building up to Fluffles driving a forklift. She just drives it when she has to fight back against Paella. But she does do the best thing in the movie. If you look closely when she returns Gromit's stuff, you can see she returns a stuffed toy of none other than Bagpuss. Woo! Yeah, baby! That was the moment I knew she was made for Gromit.
Beep, beep. I'm a sheep. I said beep, beep. I'm a sheep.
Okay, now we're really getting into masterpiece territory. Part of me doesn't even realise at some points that this is a Wallace and Gromit film, as the plot points in the film are very dark and very obscure, such as Gromit being framed and sent to prison, and Wallace having a love interest for the first time. But that's what I believe makes this duo so timeless. You could throw any narrative towards them, no matter how obscure or dark it may be, and Nick Park would still find a way for it to work. And the characters that are introduced in this are some of the most memorable in the Wallace and Gromit universe. Wendelin serves as a potential love interest to Wallace, with her having a history with inventing, with her father inventing Preston the dog, and the only reason the relationship doesn't go any further is because Wendelin doesn't like cheese. Simply amazing. This is what stands out to me from the other Wallace and Gromit projects. It just embraces everything about the duo, from cheese and crackers, to Wallace's inventing with the wall jumper machine, to Gromit going on a side quest. Speaking of Gromit, that's one huge flaw of A Close Shave. There really isn't much of him in this. If I were to list the scenes that he was in off the top of my head, I could mention when they're scoping around the house looking for who's eating all the stuff, their job at Wendelin's place, when he's in the prison, and the chase at the end. If anything, I'm willing to bet that this has the least amount of screen time from Gromit. But where this film lacks Gromit, it makes up for it with Sean. Heck, he's the first character in this film to have an impact on the plot, by escaping Preston's wrath, and does defeat Preston in the end by greeting his face to a flying anvil. As well as Sean just being funny in general, such as when he steals Wallace's cheese, and somehow managing to break out Gromit from prison with the help of all the other sheep. And the sheep also have very comedic moments during the car chase, like how they all get into formation to fit through a tunnel at high speed, and when Gromit flies by they all salute at the same time. It's humour like this that just shows how wholesome Aardman's comedic bits are, but I think the character that steals the show in this is Preston. For the entire film he's an enigma. We know very little about why he's menacing, or what his plans are. But very slowly, thanks to this film's brilliant writing, it slowly comes together that he wants to turn the sheep into dog food, which he almost gets away with if it weren't for Sean. And his design as a robot, absolutely terrifying. So terrifying in fact that as a kid, it turned me from happy and optimistic to a little puss. This is an example of what Wallace and Gromit should be, whilst also bending the rules substantially, which is a massive reason why I adore them.
Let's go, lad!
Run, rabbit, run, rabbit, run, run, run.
For their first movie, they didn't have to go this hard, but they did. This is easily one of my most rewatchable films, and is probably my top 10 animated films of all time. From the beginning, where we have this mysterious tone followed by the underrated score, you know you're in for a fun time. Not to mention that it's also a great horror parody, taking influence from Hammer horror films, whilst also having the unique twist of having the cause of the monster's appearance being a fault of our protagonist. Speaking of that, the story, as well as the twists and turns this sends you down, is an absolute blast. All I have to say is Wallace turning into a rabbit, and a rabbit turning into Wallace, and I've sold you. And with Wallace being a giant rabbit for a good portion of the film, this gives us extra screen time with Gromit, and I could not be happier. Thanks to the release of Vengeance Most Fowl, everyone has started to realise that when Wallace is sitting around chilling, Gromit is out doing some ridiculous side quests for a good portion of the movie, and it's definitely most apparent here, with scenes like the dogfight, looking after his giant melon, the first chase with the were-rabbit, and that's probably only half I've listed. But going back to the dogfight, it leads to a great climax and has some hilarious moments, with the plane needing coins to continue functioning, and Philip falling on, of all things, a bouncy castle. But that score during that section is so elevating. It just shows you how brilliantly Wallace and Gromit are able to balance two different tones so effortlessly. The voice acting is also the best out of any of these, mainly because of the stacked cast thanks to Helena Bonham Carter, Peter Kay, and of course Ray Fiennes, who voices the great Victor Quatermain. That was horrible, I'm sorry. Every line he delivers, he just sounds like he's having a blast with the screenplay. And when he finds out Wallace is the were-rabbit and looks at Gromit like this, oh boy, that's chillin'. As well as this movie being really funny, and to back up my claims, I'll just say this. None wrestling. Need I say more? Fine, I will. A bullet. The police officer's head being the shape of a police hat. The beast isn't actually dead yet. Everyone celebrating when the were-rabbit is quote-unquote dead. Hutch shouting, cheese! Gromit getting whacked on the head. This woman stealing Victor's gun only to miss the shot. Okay, I think I've said too much. Do you believe me now? So, Curse of the Were-Rabbit is incredible. Even if you're not a fan of Wallace and Gromit or don't understand British humour and culture, you'll have a wonderful time with this. Just don't go down the same path as Victor Quatermain.
Say hello to my little friend.
Hammond! Honey, where are my pants?
The wrong trousers. Literally put these guys on the animation map. This is the one Wallace and Gromit film I think of when someone mentions the duo, because it has their roles play out perfectly for other projects later on. Wallace and Gromit live a normal life until there's a problem. Wallace invents something that goes wrong and often falls into the wrong hands, and it's up to the duo, mostly Gromit, to help stop this disturbance and return to normal. I also adore the tone of this movie, as well as the dark lighting, which creates an atmosphere that is very noirish and fits brilliantly with the story, along with the humour, which is very subtle, such as Gromit perfectly carving the eyes out of a cardboard box, and Wallace screaming this.
Good grief, it's you.
Only a character like Wallace could pull off something like that and make it sound believable. But the one character who steals the show here is easily Ping Feathers McGraw. From the second he is introduced, we already know that he's no good just because of this look he gives Gromit, and it is that right there why Aardman can give characters so much expression with so little. Not to mention that this feels so much of a step up from a Grand Day Out. We get to see more of Wallace and Gromit's world, such as the museum, the construction area, the coffee shop, the park. Showing these locations grounds us in reality, making us feel as though these characters live in our own world. Which is why when Gromit leaves the household because he feels the penguin has taken his place, it feels so effective and gut-wrenching, especially when Gromit sheds a tear at his family photo. However, this short wouldn't be what it is if it weren't for the train chase. There's too many chases near the end of these films. Even 30 years on, how on earth is it possible for humans to make a stop-motion action scene as brilliantly as this? Every small detail is exceptional at this point. The comedy, the score, the cinematography, the actions of our two heroes. I've probably watched this like 15 times in my life and it's still giving me questions to ask. And it has such a funny yet perfect payoff, with the penguin being trapped in a bottle and Wallace crashing in to say this.
Well done, we did it, ha ha!
And the score elevated right at the end. It all just comes together brilliantly. So what else can I say? This is still considered stop-motion genius. It was able to earn Wallace and Gromit their first Oscar, and it's the reason why me and so many others care so much about a man obsessed with cheese and a human-like dog. I can't tell you how much I loved revisiting these. As a massive fan of stop-motion animation, and animation in general, these guys are a massive reason why I love the medium that is cinema. And everything about Aardman, which may or may not be my favourite animation company, is just so heartwarming and pure. Except for the creepy intro they had in the 90s. What's with that? So what I'm saying is, if this video does good, I'll do a ranking of all of Aardman's feature films. You heard it here first. And my final message of the video, on December 31st, 2024, we hit 500 subscribers. So in 2024, my channel went from around 140 subs, all the way to 500, which is insane. And I can't thank every one of yous enough. So who knows where this year will take us? So, you know what I'm asking for. Just a sub. A subscriber? Ooh.